The county court database flashed red. It confirmed my husband Nathan had secretly divorced me and taken full legal custody of our daughter. The judge's signature was dated 7 months ago. The plaintiff was Nathan. The defendant was Emily. Me. He had kissed my forehead at breakfast this morning. He told me to have a good day at work and drove off in the car we bought together. I did not scream. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of the screen. A finalized docket left no room for arguments. The only missing piece was how he had erased me without a single piece of mail reaching our house. For 14 months, my life had been a triangle of the law firm, the hospital, and a tiny pull-out chair in the pediatric ward. I worked 60-hour weeks drafting subpoenas just to keep my health insurance active. Every time I handed over my paycheck for another round of our daughter's physical therapy, Nathan squeezed my shoulder and called me the strongest woman he knew. He was not admiring my resilience. He was measuring my exhaustion, waiting for me to be too tired to notice the court paperwork he was hiding. It was past 9 on a Tuesday night. The 12th floor of the firm was completely empty. I was only logged in because I needed the overtime pay. Our daughter was outgrowing her old wheelchair, and the custom replacement model cost $4,000 out of pocket. I had been clearing out a backlog of property disputes when my finger slipped on the keyboard. The keystroke ran a query on our own last name. Now I was looking at a 40-page decree that stripped me of everything. I reached for the mouse and hit print. A prompt popped up on the screen, demanding a senior partner's authorization code to download closed family court files. My paralegal credentials were not enough. If I asked the IT department for an override in the morning, Nathan would have time to cover his tracks. I held my phone steady. I photographed every page of the settlement agreement. I made sure the timestamps and case numbers were perfectly legible. My hands did not shake. The man I married had spent over half a year playing house with me, while legally turning me into a stranger. He thought I was just the wallet. He forgot what I do. I parked in the driveway of the house I still thought of as ours. The porch light was off. I walked through the front door and stood at the edge of the master bedroom. Nathan was asleep. His chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. The man who had legally stripped me of my daughter was sleeping like he did not have a care in the world. I was 29 years old, and for the last 14 months, my entire existence had been a spreadsheet of medical debts. The pediatric ward had these stiff blue vinyl chairs that did not recline. I spent over 70 nights sleeping on one of those chairs, surviving on vending machine coffee. I pulled extra weekend shifts at the law firm just to cover the $1,200 a month for physical therapy. Our insurance refused to pay. Nathan always told me to rest. He promised he was handling the home front so I could focus on our daughter's recovery. He was controlling the timeline of his exit, waiting until I was too exhausted to check the mail or question a missing document. He had not kicked me out because he could not afford to yet. On the nightstand, his iPad lit up. The screen glowed in the dark bedroom, displaying a new text notification from an unsaved number. I stepped closer and picked it up. The preview text was long enough to read without unlocking the device. The crazy mother routine makes the judge sign faster. She's just our ATM. Now, I stared at the glowing letters. Another message popped up right beneath it from the same number. It was a woman complaining about the wait. She asked if the final disbursement was ready. Nathan had replied earlier, leaving the conversation thread open. His outgoing message said they just needed my electronic signature on the last medical release form by Friday. He also reminded her that they had to keep using my primary credit card to cover the upcoming insurance premium, so the account would not trigger any fraud alerts. That answered how he managed the narrative. The court believed I was an unstable, absent mother who had surrendered her rights. He played the exhausted, dedicated father. It was a perfect, quiet execution, but a final disbursement meant a lump sum. They were waiting for a specific payout. I set the iPad back on the nightstand, face down, exactly where I found it. My daughter's medical bills were piling up under my name, while my husband was setting up a new life with someone else. I needed to know exactly what fortune they were trying to steal. I went to make coffee. Wednesday morning started exactly like the 100 mornings before. I stood in the kitchen at 6:45 and poured dark roast coffee into Nathan's silver travel mug. He walked in wearing his navy suit, checking his watch. He kissed the side of my head, took the mug, and told me to have a good day at the firm. I smiled. I told him to drive safe. I listened to his footsteps in the hall, the heavy thud of the front door, and the low hum of the garage motor closing. The silence settled over the kitchen. I did not move for a full minute. I just listened to the refrigerator running. Then, I opened my laptop on the granite counter. I navigated to the central banking portal. We had a specific account set up for our daughter's settlement funds. I typed in the username and our standard password. The screen refreshed and threw a red error banner. The password was incorrect. I tried the security question recovery. The system prompted me for a secondary authentication PIN sent to a device I did not recognize. He had locked me out. I closed the laptop lid. I did not throw it. I did not cry. I had spent 7 years as a paralegal, tracking down hidden assets for senior partners during messy corporate divorces. I knew that a locked digital door was just an invitation to find a window. I picked up my phone and called the local bank branch on Providence Road. I ignored the automated menu and dialed the direct extension for the wire transfer desk. A woman named Janice answered on the second ring. Janete. Good morning. This is Emily from the Legal Compliance Department. I said. I pitched my voice to the exact flat, hurried tone of a reconciliation clerk, checking off a list. I need to verify the status of a pending disbursement for a minor's trust. Janice asked for the account number and the primary taxpayer ID. I read the account off a medical billing statement sitting next to the coffee maker and gave my own social security number, which was still anchored to the joint file. Ah, yes, Janice said, the sound of her keyboard clicking through the phone. I see a pending wire transfer initiated late last night. Could you verify the exact clearance amount for our ledger? I asked. $145,000. Janice read. My fingers tightened around the phone. There it was. The entire compensation for my daughter's accident. Every single dollar meant for her physical therapy, her future surgeries, and her custom wheelchair. Nathan was draining the account down to zero. And the routing destination, I asked, keeping my voice entirely level. It's being routed to an overseas digital wallet, Janice said. It's currently in the mandatory 48-hour hold period for international wires. It officially clears tomorrow morning at 8. I took a breath. I had less than 24 hours, but the money was not gone yet. Perfect. Thank you. Janitze. I said, no problem at all. She replied cheerfully. Just for compliance. The system just generated an automated SMS alert to the primary phone number on file, confirming this verbal inquiry. Have a great day. The line clicked dead. I stood perfectly still in the kitchen. Nathan's phone was the primary number. He was sitting in morning traffic on Interstate 485. His phone had just buzzed in the cup holder. An alert that someone was probing the stolen trust fund. He knew someone was looking. 20 minutes after I hung up with the bank teller, the front door opened. Nathan was home 3 hours early. He walked into the kitchen carrying a bouquet of white hydrangeas. He set them on the granite counter. He walked over and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. I did not pull away. I let him hold me. His cologne smelled like cedar, but his breathing was fast and shallow against my neck. You work too hard. Emily, he murmured, kissing the side of my head. I was thinking on the drive home. You haven't taken a single day off since the accident. I want to book you a week at that spa resort in Asheville. Just you. Room service. And absolutely no stress. I will handle everything here. He smoothed my hair down. A week in Asheville meant 5 full business days. That was more than enough time for a 48-hour international wire hold to clear the compliance department. It was more than enough time for him to empty the accounts, pack up his things, and vanish. While I was sitting in a sauna, I leaned back and looked at his face. His eyes were wide and steady. He had practiced that concerned, loving expression in the rearview mirror on the way home. "That sounds perfect," I said. "Thank you." He exhaled a long breath of pure relief and went upstairs to change. At 10:30 that night, Nathan went into the master bathroom. I waited until I heard the shower water running. His phone was sitting on the nightstand, plugged into the wall charger. I unplugged it and carried it down the hall into my home office. I woke up my laptop and connected his phone with a USB cable. I knew his passcode. It was the month and year we got married. I unlocked the screen and clicked the button to initiate a full local backup. A progress bar appeared on the monitor. 12 minutes remained on the bar. I sat in the dark office and listened to the water rushing through the pipes in the walls. The blue bar crawled across the screen. 10%. 20%. I needed his text message history. I needed to see exactly who he was coordinating with. And more importantly, I needed the missing piece of the timeline. A man does not successfully finalize a divorce without the spouse receiving a single piece of mail from the county clerk. The legal system requires certified mail or process servers. He had to be intercepting the court summons. I needed this data to tell me how he bypassed the mailing system. The blue bar hit 45%. The water shut off in the master bathroom. I froze. Nathan's heavy footsteps moved across the tile floor. The bathroom door hinges creaked open. "Emily," he called out from the bedroom. "Have you seen my new razor?" The progress bar ticked to 46. He was walking across the bedroom carpet. If he looked at the nightstand, his phone was gone. I yanked the USB cable out of the laptop port. The screen flashed bright red with a corrupted sync error. I shoved his phone into my sweater pocket, grabbed a stack of blank legal pads from my desk, and walked out into the hallway just as he stepped out of the bedroom in a white towel. "I think it is under the sink in the guest bath," I said. He smiled, completely oblivious, and turned toward the guest room. I walked into our bedroom and quietly set his phone back on the nightstand charger. The backup file on my laptop was cut right in the middle. I only captured half of his data. Half had to be enough. Thursday morning. The 12th floor of the firm smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I sat in my cubicle with the old iPad flat on the desk. I had 46% of Nathan's digital footprint. It was a fractured, messy archive of incomplete photo albums and cached emails. The iCloud keychain had synced entirely before I pulled the USB cable. I had his saved passwords. I did not waste time looking for messages from his mistress. That would not explain the missing court documents. Instead, I opened the web browser and navigated to the login page of a secondary credit card account he kept in his own name. I used the autofill feature. The dashboard loaded. I ignored the gas station charges and the restaurant receipts. I exported the last 8 months of statements into a spreadsheet and filtered the columns for recurring monthly payments. On the third line down, I found it. A monthly charge of $35 to a private shipping center in Concord. 2 towns over. The first charge was dated exactly 3 weeks before the court finalized the custody decree. I opened a new tab. I searched the shipping center's name and found their customer portal. The keychain auto-filled his credentials again. The portal dashboard displayed an active rental agreement for Box 419. I clicked on the digital document archive attached to the account. There was a scanned PDF of a United States Postal Service change of address form. Nathan had not simply rushed to the mailbox at our house every afternoon to hide the envelopes. That left too much room for human error. He had filed a formal, permanent redirection order. Every single piece of correspondence addressed to me from the Mecklenburg County Clerk, every divorce petition, every hearing notice regarding our daughter, had been systematically intercepted by the Postal Service and routed to a steel box in a strip mall 15 miles away. He had built a ghost identity for me. When I did not show up to family court, the judge assumed I was receiving the summons and simply choosing to abandon my own child. I downloaded the PDF and zoomed in on the bottom of the page to open a commercial mailbox and redirect federal mail in someone else's name. The facility required a notarized identity verification form. My name was signed on the applicant line in blue ink. The loop of the Y and the slant of the E matched my signature perfectly. I checked the date next to the signature. It was a Tuesday in November. I had been sitting at this exact desk for 14 hours that day, drafting interrogatories for a senior partner. I was nowhere near Concord. Nathan was a project manager. He could forge my initials on a contractor invoice. A federal mail redirection form, though, required a registered notary public to stamp the page and record the identification in a ledger. He could not do this alone. Someone with a state-issued seal had sat across a desk from him, looked at a forged driver's license, and legally validated my absence. I stared at the black ink of the notary stamp, blurred in the scan. The firm's archive room was a windowless concrete square on the 12th floor. It smelled like old paper and industrial floor wax. I locked the heavy wooden door behind me, pulled up a metal folding chair, and set my old iPad on top of a stack of sealed depositions. I opened the Messages app. The data from Nathan's phone had populated the screen in chronological order. Hundreds of gray and blue bubbles stretched down the glass. I did not start with the messages from yesterday. I scrolled all the way back to October of last year. I needed to see the blueprint of the theft. I found the answer to the missing mail almost immediately. I stopped on a conversation thread from the second Tuesday in November. That was the exact day the federal mail redirection form was stamped in Concord. Nathan had sent a text at 2 p.m. to the unsaved number. The mailbox is done. Arthur got his paralegal to stamp the notary line. We are clear. The reply came a minute later. Thank God. When does the judge sign the custody order? Nathan answered immediately. Arthur says, another 3 weeks. Then the kid's settlement is ours. Arthur was a prominent defense attorney who handled high-profile liability cases for Nathan's construction executives. He was not just a friend giving casual advice over a beer. Arthur was the legal architect behind the mail fraud. He had used his own firm's resources to bypass the state notary requirements. He turned a federal offense into a simple favor for a client. I kept reading. The messages between Nathan and the unsaved number spanned months. They discussed the $145,000 like it was a winning lottery ticket. They talked about using the money for a down payment on a lake house. They treated my daughter's physical therapy fund as their own personal real estate budget. A third conversation thread caught my attention. It was a direct exchange with a contact saved as Mom. I opened the thread. The messages from early December showed Nathan asking his mother to cancel their usual Sunday dinner because I was asking too many questions about the unpaid hospital bills. His mother replied 3 minutes later, just keep her quiet until the disbursement clears. Do not ruin this now. She knew. She had sat at my dining table on Thanksgiving, passing the gravy and asking about my daughter's physical therapy progress. She knew exactly what her son had been doing. I stared at her text message. The gray bubble sat perfectly aligned on the screen. She was actively coaching him through the theft. I needed to find out exactly what her role was and what share of the money she was expecting to receive for her silence. I turned off the iPad screen. I left the archive room and walked straight back to my cubicle. The morning staff was starting to arrive. Phones were ringing in the background. I picked up my receiver and dialed the direct internal routing number for the Mercer County Family Court Records Division. A clerk answered on the third ring. I gave my firm's name and my employee identification number to bypass the standard public queue. I need to place an emergency administrative freeze on a minor's trust associated with a closed family court docket. I said, there is an active fraud investigation regarding the custodial parent. I can pull up the file, the clerk said, her keyboard clacking. I just need the 12-digit case number. I recited the number from the photographs on my phone. All right. I have the decree. The clerk said, however, I can only take a freeze motion from the custodial parent or their legal representation. I am the child's mother. I said, my name is Emily. I am looking at the final decree right now. Ma'am, the clerk said. Her tone shifted from helpful to strictly bureaucratic. Your parental rights were voluntarily terminated in November. You have no legal standing to freeze this account or to request any administrative modifications. You need a court order. How do I get a court order if I do not have legal standing to file? You would have to file a formal petition to reopen the custody arrangement, which requires serving the custodial parent and scheduling a hearing. She said, that takes about 6 to 8 weeks. Nathan's wire transfer was clearing tomorrow morning at 8. 6 weeks meant the money would be on another continent. I thanked the clerk and hung up the phone. I was sitting at a desk surrounded by legal statutes and case law. The system only recognized the forged paperwork. I was legally a ghost. Friday evening brought a heavy rain that washed the leftover autumn leaves against the front windows. Nathan was supposedly at a late construction site inspection. The doorbell rang at 6. I opened the door to find his mother Brenda standing on the porch, holding a large glass container of homemade chicken soup wrapped in a kitchen towel. She wore her beige trench coat and a practiced look of deep maternal concern. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, shaking the rain from her umbrella and setting the heavy container on the granite kitchen island. You look absolutely exhausted, Emily, Brenda said. She took off her coat and draped it over a bar stool. I was just telling Nathan yesterday. You cannot keep running yourself into the ground like this. Working those long hours and spending every weekend at the pediatric clinic is too much. A mother needs her rest. She walked over to the cabinets and pulled out a porcelain bowl. Then she started ladling the soup. She moved around my kitchen with the easy familiarity of a woman who firmly believed she was the true matriarch of the house. I leaned against the counter and watched her. Nathan is really stepping up, Brenda continued, wiping a stray drop of broth from the counter with a paper towel. He told me he is taking over the financial side of things. The hospital bills, the insurance calls, the settlement paperwork. You should let him handle the money. You just focus on getting your energy back. She handed me the bowl. The steam rose between us, smelling of rosemary and black pepper. I told him back in November that you just needed a break from all the legal stress, she said. She smiled warmly. November, the month the judge signed the final custody decree. The month I was legally erased from my own family. Brenda did not slip up. She was deliberately playing her designated role in the timeline. She was here to reinforce the narrative that I was a fragile, overwhelmed woman, stepping back from her duties for her own good. I looked at her soft, concerned eyes. It was plain how the family closed ranks between us in that moment. She was not a passive bystander who accidentally found out about a secret divorce. She was actively managing. A family with something to hide will often build a wall of absolute silence to protect their own, but they still need someone to keep the outsider calm until the locks are changed. She sat at my Thanksgiving table 3 weeks after that decree was signed. She passed me the mashed potatoes. She asked about my daughter's physical therapy progress. She kept the house quiet and the illusion intact so her son could work his theft in peace. I took a spoonful of the soup. It was perfectly seasoned. You are right, I said. I am going to let Nathan handle the heavy lifting from now on. Brenda beamed. She patted my arm, deeply satisfied that her errand was complete. She washed her hands in the sink, put her trench coat back on, and told me to call her if I needed absolutely anything. I stood in the foyer and locked the front door behind her. I walked back to the kitchen, took the bowl of soup, and dumped it straight down the garbage disposal. I went into my home office and opened the encrypted laptop. The iCloud messages I had pulled from Nathan's phone confirmed Brenda was coaching him. I still needed to find the exact weapon they used to convince a judge I was unfit. I opened the folder containing the photographs of the family court docket. I scrolled past the financial separation terms and the custody assignment. I stopped on the evidence ledger attached to the judge's signature. Exhibit C was listed as a mandatory psychiatric evaluation order. It was a formal medical document submitted to the court, legally declaring me mentally compromised. Nathan could easily forge my signature on a mail redirection form. He could not forge a state medical license. Someone with actual medical credentials had to sign that paper. I stared at the glowing screen. A mother does not help her son steal a disabled child's settlement just out of blind family loyalty. I needed to know exactly what percentage of my daughter's $145,000 Brenda expected to receive for her silence. It was 8:15 when Brenda's taillights disappeared down the wet street. The house was completely silent again. I walked straight past the kitchen, leaving the empty soup container on the counter, and went back into my home office. I opened my laptop. I had the routing information for the overseas digital wallet from the bank teller yesterday morning. The $145,000 was still in the mandatory 48-hour hold. That digital wallet wasn't set up just to receive one big wire. Nathan would have tested it. He would have used it to siphon off smaller amounts to pay his accomplices before the final payout. I logged into our joint checking account. I opened a second window with the credit card statements. I started cross-referencing the transaction dates from the last 7 months. Nathan was a project manager. He knew how to hide big expenses in a budget, but he was careless with the margins. I found a string of withdrawals labeled as out-of-network medical consulting fees. They were billed directly to the joint account, draining $3,000 or $4,000 at a time. The descriptions were intentionally vague. Labels read behavioral analysis, equipment deposit, therapy consultation. The merchant identification codes did not match any clinic in the state. I needed the exact destination of those funds. I logged into my paralegal portal to run a commercial credit inquiry on the merchant identification number. I typed the digits and hit enter. The screen refreshed. Then it went entirely gray. A security banner flashed across the top of the monitor. My credit monitoring access was temporarily locked due to an excessive volume of secure queries in a 24-hour period. I could not run another search until Monday morning. I sat back in my chair. The block cost me my main investigative tool, but it was too late to protect him. The final query had already loaded the merchant profile just before the system froze. I read the text on the frozen screen. The medical consulting firm was a shell name. The actual registered vendor was a luxury travel agency based out of Miami. I looked at the total amount funneled to that vendor over the last 7 months. It was exactly $25,000. The booking confirmation was attached to a secondary email address, but the passenger name was listed in plain text. Brenda. My mother-in-law wasn't protecting Nathan out of blind maternal loyalty. She was being paid for her silence. The woman who sat in my kitchen an hour ago wore a cheap trench coat and claimed she didn't have a spare dollar to help with her granddaughter's physical therapy. She had used my daughter's settlement to book a 14-day luxury river cruise through Europe. She was financing her retirement vacation with the money meant for a disabled child. I closed the laptop. The financial trail was complete. Brenda had her cruise. Arthur had his notary fees. Nathan had his down payment. They had divided my life into neat little shares, but there was still one piece missing. To get that custody decree, someone with an actual state medical license had to sign the psychiatric evaluation declaring me unfit. Neither Brenda nor Arthur could do that. I opened my phone and pulled up the photograph of Exhibit C. I needed to see exactly who signed that paper. I zoomed in on the signature. Monday morning arrived with a cold drizzle that slicked the pavement outside the firm. I was at my desk by 7. The building was mostly quiet, except for the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional ringing of a phone down the hall. My boss, Mr. Vance, had a senior partner's login for the state medical board database. He kept his password on a yellow sticky note beneath his keyboard. It was a massive security violation that I had warned him about twice. Today, I was relying on it. I watched him walk past my cubicle with a stack of depositions, heading toward the main conference room for a 3-hour mediation. I waited exactly 2 minutes, then I stood up, walked into his empty office, and closed the glass door. I sat in his leather chair and woke up his monitor. I typed the string of numbers from the sticky note and gained unrestricted access to the firm's premium LexisNexis investigative portal. The proprietary system logged every search query with a timestamp. Esther, Vance would eventually see that his terminal was used for an unauthorized investigation, putting my paralegal license in direct jeopardy. I hit accept on the user agreement anyway. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the photograph of Exhibit C, the psychiatric evaluation that cost me my daughter. The signature at the bottom was a looping, hurried cursive. The printed name below it read Dr. Valerie Hayes. I typed Valerie Hayes into the deep background search bar. The system pulled her employment history. There was no medical license attached to that name in the entire state. I looked closer at the photograph of the document. Beneath the forged signature was a string of digits representing a state medical license number. I typed those 9 numbers into the credential reverse lookup tool. The registry immediately populated a profile. The license number was completely real. It belonged to Dr. Marcus Weber, a 62-year-old clinical psychologist with a private practice in South Haven. Nathan had not hired a fake doctor. He had stolen a real doctor's credentials. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Dr. Weber's clinic. The practice had a standard website with a staff directory. I clicked on the page. Dr. Weber's professional headshot sat at the top. I scrolled down to the administrative staff. There was a photograph of a woman in her late 20s with blonde hair and a bright, practiced smile. The text below her picture listed her as Valerie Kensington. The front desk receptionist, Hayes was her maiden name. Valerie was the woman texting my husband about buying a lake house. She was the mistress waiting for my daughter's money to clear. She sat at a reception desk, stole her boss's license number, and stamped a legal document declaring me an unfit mother. I did not gasp. I reached over to Mr. Vance's printer. I had the electronic wire transfer order from the bank saved on my secure drive. I hit print. The machine whirred to life and spat out the wire confirmation, the mailbox screenshots, and Valerie's staff profile. I gathered the warm pages and slid them into a thick manila folder. I had the paper trail. I had the fraudulent notary, the stolen medical stamp, and the travel agency receipts. The only problem was the legal wall around them. If I went to the police right now, Nathan would deny it, Arthur would tie it up in jurisdiction disputes, and the money would bounce through 5 different overseas accounts before a detective even opened a file. I needed to lock my husband, his mother, and his defense attorney in a single room with no exits. And I needed to do it without making them suspect a thing. The law firm I worked for handled massive corporate disputes, which meant we had priority filing status at the Mercer County Courthouse. I did not file a motion to contest the custody decree. That would trigger a 6-week review process and give Nathan time to wire the money overseas. Instead, I used my paralegal credentials to file an emergency financial mediation notice regarding a disputed minor's trust. I attached defense attorney Arthur's state bar number as the opposing counsel of record. It was a procedural blind spot. A mandatory mediation summons required all involved parties to appear in a closed room before any disputed funds could be legally dispersed. If they did not show up, the wire transfer would be automatically frozen by the county clerk. They had to come at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. I sat on one side of a long oak table in Mediation Room 4. The walls were painted a dull, institutional gray. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning vent above my head. The door opened. Arthur walked in first. He checked his silver wristwatch. He looked thoroughly annoyed to be pulled away from his billable hours for a minor domestic dispute. Brenda came in next, carrying a designer handbag, her mouth pressed into a tight, thin line. Nathan walked in last. He closed the heavy wooden door behind him. The brass latch clicked into place. The court mediator had not arrived yet. We were entirely alone. The second the lock engaged, Nathan's posture completely changed. The concerned, loving husband routine vanished. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and pulled out a chair. He leaned back with the relaxed, sprawling confidence of a man who held all the winning cards. Brenda sat next to him and immediately crossed her arms, refusing to even look at me. I have to admit, Emily, Nathan said, his voice flat and perfectly calm, I did not think you had the nerve to drag Arthur down here. You are making this much harder on yourself than it needs to be. Arthur opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a single legal document. He did not speak. He slid it across the polished wood. It stopped in front of my hands. "We are not here to litigate," Nathan said. "The decree is finalized. You have no legal standing. But I am not an unreasonable man. I know you want to see our daughter." I looked down at the paper. It was a permanent waiver of financial interest. "Sign the waiver," Nathan said. "Relinquish any future claim to the accident settlement, and I will formally agree to grant you 2 supervised visits a month. That is the absolute best you are going to get." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You saw the psychiatric evaluation," he said smoothly. "Exhibit C. A licensed medical professional declared you unstable. If you try to fight this in front of a judge, you will never see her again. Take the deal. Emily, it is the only option you have left." This was his masterstroke. His forged paperwork was an impenetrable fortress, and he was graciously offering me a tiny window to look through. I did not panic. I did not raise my voice. I did not reach for a pen. I just looked at Arthur. The prestigious defense attorney was sitting back in his chair, tapping an expensive pen against his notepad, waiting for the hysterical ex-wife to break down and sign the paper. He thought this was a standard, slightly aggressive family law maneuver. He had no idea his client had used his office to forge a federal mail document. He did not know the medical license on Exhibit C had been stolen by a clinic receptionist. I did not say a word. I just waited for the door to open. The heavy wooden door clicked open. A county magistrate walked into the mediation room and took the seat at the head of the oak table. Nathan sat back and folded his hands. He wore the calm, reasonable expression of a father who had just offered a generous compromise. He waited for me to argue. He wanted the magistrate to see a hysterical woman throwing away her last chance to see her daughter. I did not argue. I did not shed a single tear. I reached into my leather tote and pulled out the thick manila folder I had printed yesterday morning. I did not throw it at Nathan. I placed it flat on the polished wood. I pushed it with 2 fingers. It slid across the table and stopped directly in front of Arthur. Arthur frowned. He placed his expensive pen down. "Your Honor, I must object," Arthur said. His voice was crisp and dismissive. "This is a closed mediation regarding a finalized decree. Any unverified documents submitted outside the discovery period are inadmissible." He reached out to push the folder back across the table. His thumb brushed the cover flap, exposing the top page. It was the electronic wire transfer order for $145,000. Arthur's hand stopped. He looked at the bank logo. He looked at the routing numbers. Then he flipped the page. He saw the federal mail redirection form from the Concord Shipping Center. He saw my forged signature. He saw his own paralegal's notary stamp, validating a fraudulent document. "Arthur," Nathan said. His voice lost a fraction of its smooth confidence. "What did she give you?" "Just slide it back." Arthur did not slide it back. He turned to the 3rd page. It was a side-by-side printout. On the left was Exhibit C, the psychiatric evaluation declaring me unfit, signed by a licensed doctor. On the right was the staff directory of the South Charlotte Clinic, showing the same woman as the front desk receptionist. The silence in the room became absolute. The magistrate leaned forward. Watching Arthur's face drain of color, Nathan realized something was wrong. He leaned across the table and reached for the folder. His hand was shaking. His fingers clamped down on the edge of the manila paper, but his grip slipped. His knuckles slammed into his glass of ice water. The heavy glass tipped over. Water flooded across the polished oak. Soaking into his expensive suit sleeve, he opened his mouth to speak. Only a sharp, stuttering breath came out. Arthur recoiled. He physically pushed his chair back from the table. Putting 3 feet of distance between himself and his client, he looked at Nathan with pure, unfiltered disgust. "Arthur, listen to me," Nathan stammered. He tried to wipe the water off his sleeve, but his hands were trembling too violently. She fabricated that she is trying to do not say another word. Arthur snapped. His voice cut through the room like a whip. You used my office to forge a federal mail document. You handed a fraudulent medical evaluation to a sitting judge. Brenda grabbed Nathan's arm. Her designer handbag slid off her lap and hit the floor. Spilling mints across the carpet, she looked at her son, the reality of her stolen cruise money suddenly catching up to her. Arthur stood up. He picked up the wet folder and handed it directly to the magistrate. A defense attorney protects his client, but a smart defense attorney protects his own license first. Your Honor, Arthur said, I am withdrawing as counsel immediately, and I formally request that this room be locked until court security arrives. He stood up, addressed the magistrate, and formally withdrew as counsel. Then he handed the manila folder directly across the table. The magistrate opened it. He looked at the forged federal mail redirection form from the Concord Shipping Center. He looked at the wire transfer receipt and the stolen medical license number. He did not ask Nathan for an explanation. He picked up the heavy black receiver on his desk. He dialed the courthouse security office. Nathan stood up. He told the magistrate this was a simple misunderstanding. He looked at Arthur and pleaded with him to explain the situation. Nobody answered him. 2 bailiffs walked into the mediation room. 3 minutes later, they did not ask Nathan to step outside. They secured his wrists behind his back, right there in the windowless gray room. They read him his rights regarding federal mail fraud and the financial abuse of a minor. Brenda stood up and tried to quietly walk out the heavy wooden door. A 3rd bailiff stepped into the frame and told her to sit back down. She did not look at her son. She watched the bailiff, her face completely white. As Nathan was walked out into the public hallway, in handcuffs, the court reversed the custody decree by Friday. They froze the overseas digital wallet before the 48-hour hold expired. Valerie Kensington was arrested at the front desk of the South Charlotte Clinic the following Monday. The medical board permanently banned her from the healthcare industry, and the district attorney filed felony fraud charges against her. Brenda did not get her luxury river cruise. The state froze her retirement accounts to recover the stolen $25,000. She spent the rest of the year trying to find a defense attorney who would take a payment plan. Arthur had made sure every reputable firm in the county knew exactly what her family was capable of. It took 6 weeks for the final settlement funds to clear into a secure trust solely under my name. On a Tuesday afternoon, I picked my daughter up from her physical therapy appointment. The clinic lobby was warm and bright. I walked her out to the curb. I did not bring her old, worn-out wheelchair to the car. I had unboxed a brand new custom model that morning. It was lightweight, engineered perfectly for her frame, and fully paid for. I helped her into the new seat. I strapped her in. Then I walked back to the old chair. It was covered in scuffs. The brakes were loose, and it held the weight of 14 exhausted months. I collapsed the frame. I carried it over to the commercial dumpster at the edge of the parking lot. I leaned it against the metal siding and walked away. A forged psychiatric evaluation might steal a child's settlement on paper, but the docket system never forgets who actually walked away from their child. I know exactly what you were yelling at your screen. You were yelling for Emily to wake Nathan up the second she saw that court docket and demand to know what he had done. You were wondering how a smart paralegal could let her husband handle the mail for 7 months without getting suspicious. But let's look at the psychology here. When you're living on vending machine coffee and sleeping on vinyl hospital chairs, your brain goes into survival mode. Toxic partners use this. They use the slot machine effect. They give you just enough support, a shoulder squeeze, a hot cup of coffee. It keeps you pulling the lever, hoping the partnership is real. Nathan didn't just forge paperwork. He engineered her exhaustion. He made himself the only relief she had. He did it so she would never have the energy to double-check his work. That is what makes Emily's counterattack so brilliant. She didn't let her rage make her sloppy. Let's break down her 3 smartest moves. First, she used the verification call. When she got locked out of the bank portal, she didn't confront him. She used her professional persona to call the teller. confirming the wire transfer and the deadline without ever leaving a fingerprint. Second, she pulled the local backup the moment Nathan tried to send her away to a spa. She knew he was accelerating the timeline. She didn't argue. She smiled, accepted the gift, and immediately ripped his digital footprint straight onto her own device. She gathered her ammunition in absolute silence, and finally, she built the mediation trap. If she had filed a normal motion, Nathan would have drained the accounts and vanished. By filing an emergency financial mediation, she legally froze the funds and forced all of her abusers into a locked room with a magistrate. She even brought his own defense attorney to act as her primary witness. She used the very system they manipulated to build a cage they couldn't escape. When a toxic family steals your life, they expect you to act with emotion. When you act with documentation, you strip them of their power. You are not just the wallet. You are the architect of your own recovery. Have you ever had to use a quiet paper trail to expose a loud liar? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where in the world you're listening from. And hit subscribe for more. We have a lot more truth to uncover together.